There is a world we will only report once, and it is the only world in this book where anything ever changed. Every other world here holds still for you. The reruns come around on schedule. The man in the white hat gets in through the same window every Thursday, and nothing in any of them ever becomes something it wasn't on the first page. And not this one. And this one has a castle in it, and the castle has a wing, and in that wing a thing happened that happens nowhere else in the book, or in the whole of the Father's creation. And when this report is over, the road closes behind it for good, because a road you can walk twice leads to a place that stayed the same, and this place did not. So set the remote down. And this is the chapter about the one event your world was built to make impossible, and it is named for it. To keep up. It has 2 queens, which is part of why the road closes. We could never afford to come back and check which was which. Well, one reigned inside the walls and one worked from outside them, and as near as we could ever tell, they wanted the same thing, and one went about it with honey and one with a sting, and from where the prince stood you could not always tell the wanting apart by the method. Oh, we will get to the prince. He is new to this book by that name, though you've been reading him the whole time. And then we will get to the difference between honey and sting, because it is the hinge of the whole report, and it is not a difference of manners. It is a difference of physics. First, the one inside, the one whose face this report has never once held still, because every time we fix it, it turns into another woman we knew, as if the people we cannot finish grieving come back to us through the ones who come after. A hive has a queen, and the queen is not a ruler. That is the first thing the pictures get wrong. She is a function. She is fed and cleaned and turned by 10,000 who will never be her. And in return she does the one thing the colony cannot do without and cannot bear to watch, which is make the next ones. And she is the most attended body in the whole hive, and the most alone. And she is never once thanked, because a function cannot be thanked, and because a queen who started keeping a ledger of what she was owed would never make another thing as long as she lived. And this queen kept one. And that was the first sign, if anyone had been reading the signs, that something in the machinery had come loose. And the castle had a queen, and the court had quietly stopped supporting her, and nobody voted, because courts do not vote on a thing like that. They schedule it. A dislike, in a court, is a scheduling instrument. Her invitations began arriving a day late, worded perfectly. The musicians rotated out of her wing one at a time, each departure individually reasonable. Her name drifted toward the bottom of documents the way sediment drifts, obeying no order that anyone gave. But by the time she was sick, the corps had been rehearsing her absence for years, and the year itself got rebuilt so it never passed her wing. Feasts migrating to far halls, the whole calendar limping the long way around her door. And nobody decided any of this. And that is the thing to understand about castles and courts and houses. Nobody ever decides. And they simply agreed, quietly. And here the report has to be honest, because you would smell it otherwise, and because she would have smelled it first. Some of the hate was earned. She was difficult. She rang for people at hours chosen to prove they would come. And they came, and she entered it. And the entering was the point. She kept her own ledgers, the slights, going back decades, and she read them at people, at feasts, at funerals, at the exact wrong moment with the exact right facts. She said the unforgivable true thing the way other people pass the salt. The court forgave the king everything and forgave her nothing, and that unbalanced scale was rigged and cruel, and also some of the entries against her were fair. Behold both. I'm not building a saint here. A saint is what a court builds when it is finally done with you, and I am doing the opposite of what a court does, all the way down. And now the part I must do with my hands tied behind my back. But before all of it, before the wing, before the ledgers, before the scheduling. She had a thing, and nobody in the family could name it. I am not going to name it either. And I want you to understand this is not a failure of the report. It is the whole report. And naming it is how the courts kill it. And they name it, then they schedule it, then they mint it, and then they inform you, with regret, that it was never real. And so, that thing, I'll tell you only what it did. Her rooms were different with her in them, and not always better. I told you this wasn't a sainting, but charge, the way meant. A hall she crossed had been about something, and everybody in it went home knowing that, and not one of them could have written down what. Strangers left her orbit rearranged and spent years calling it other things. And nobody else under that roof had it. That the king didn't have it, and the king knew he didn't have it, and he could not name it either. And he married it, which is one way of never needing to. I did not like her. And there it is, the sentence this whole report was built to carry. The one I have set down and picked back up more times than the ledgers could hold. And nobody in that court liked her by the end, and I was of that same court. And the queen's own son, which the court had a word for and never used to my face. The prince. A prince is only a boy a room agrees is owed something, and then does not pay. And she never paid me either. And I want that entered before the love is, because the love does not hold otherwise. The queen of the hive gave the prince no reward. Not once, not a coin, not a turned head at the right moment. And I ducked her bell like the rest of them. I let the corridor around me. The arc around her door knew my feet. I did not like her, and I love her, and both of those are true at once, in the same chest, without canceling, and carrying both at once is the heaviest work we do on our side of the gap. I will come back to that way. It is coming, and it is the hardest one in this book. The king is in this report exactly once, and it is now. I saw one paragraph cross his eyes, once, in the doorway of her wing, and the year the schedule stopped bothering to disguise itself, and it was gone before he had reached the stair, and he never sent it. And not then, not after, not at the rail of the grave. So I am delivering it for him. And this is his voice, not mine. It crosses the gap set apart, the way everything crosses between us, which is, once, and without a reply. I knew. Enter that wherever things get entered, because nobody else is going to. The wing was cold and the schedule was mine. A castle does nothing its king has not signed somewhere, in some year, in ink he no longer remembers signing. And I have gone back through the years and I cannot find the page, and I know my own hand when I see it. And the same season was on the both of you. Her in the wing, you up under the roof, two of you going under the same house at 2 speeds, and I was the winter. I saw it playing for one breath, in her doorway, the way a man steps back into his own house from outside and smells it at last. The whole house, mine, doing what it was doing, on schedule, to both of you. And I could carry one thing at a time. That is the belt. I have never claimed otherwise, and no one has ever accused me of otherwise, which is its own entry in a ledger somewhere. A man who can carry one thing, in a house where two are drowning, learns to see one. I chose which one to see. There. That is the paragraph. I've set it down nowhere for 30 years, and I am setting it down here. And if my eyes were wet in that doorway, it was the wind, and there is no wind in that corridor, and I knew it then, and now you know I knew it. That is the only paragraph he gets. I caught it eye to eye, no sound, the heaviest parcel ever shipped across the gap, and I have carried it since, which is a thing you should know about our side. We will carry anything if it was true once. And you should ask, if you are the kind of reader this book is hoping for, how a boy catches a paragraph that crosses a man's eyes for one breath in a cold doorway and is gone before the stare. I will tell you, because it is the hinge of everything that comes after. Ducking the bell for a whole childhood is a school. A boy who has to know, before he walks into a room, exactly what the room is going to cost him, becomes a reader of faces, the best in any court, out of pure survival. And one of the queens saw him doing it. Here the two blur again, and we have never been able to fix which mouth it came from. Saw him always watching, waiting, from the safe edge of every room, and said, half unkind, the way she said everything she never rewarded, that he would grow up to be the world's finest watcher of birds. She meant it small. It was the first of two things she handed him offhand that turned out to be the whole inheritance. The second one is at the end of the report, and it breaks physics, and we are not ready for it yet. You keep the birds in your hand, but we will need them later. And now the turn this world gets reported for it all. The court expected her to end the way disliked Queen's End. And there is a procedure for it, and everyone knows the procedure. The bitterness going to vinegar. The bells rung at 3 in the morning to prove the feet still come. The litigation with heaven conducted at volume through a closed door. The court had braced for that ending, had scheduled for it, had very nearly catered it. She did something else instead, and nobody was ready, and I was the least ready of anyone. She began to solve herself. I don't have a better word for it than I have looked, so let me tell you what the word means here, because it is not the real kind. It is the older kind, the one that was in the word before anybody used it on puzzles. To loosen. Absolve. Dissolve. Solvent. Solve. One root, and it means let go, and it also means pay off. Behold both. She did both. But for 40 years the sound behind the door had been the pen. Everyone in the wing knew it the way you know a clock. The scratch of an entry going in, a name, an hour, a slight, and the maids timed their steps to it. And near the end the sound changed. Her voice, alone, hours at a stretch. Not prayer. Prayer has an addressee, and this had none. And not raving. Raving has no structure, and this was all structure. She was reading the book back, but both sides of it. She read an entry, and answered it, and took issue with the answer, and ruled on the issue, and moved to the next year of herself. Some entries she read twice and let stand, and that is how I know the work was real. She was not performing forgiveness for an audience of stone. And under the voice, less and less, the pen. A maid outside the door heard her laugh once, alone, at something 40 years gone, and the laugh was not bitter, and the maid stood in the court, or and cried and could not have told you why. I can. A court can survive anything except a queen who has stopped keeping score. Because that is what she did, in the end, and it is the whole of what she did. She did not balance the book. She closed it. A queen who keeps a ledger will never make another thing as long as she lives. I told you that at the top. She put the pen down to make one more thing, and it was herself. This was metamorphosis, of a kind, and I use the word on purpose, because the chapter is named for it, and because I have looked for a smaller word and there is none. Behold it carefully, because it was the possible kind, the kind allowed even in that world, the change that stays inside the creature. AB is a thing that becomes in sequence, egg, grub, the sealed dark self, the long work, and then climbs out as AB. The change is written into the B at the factory. But what she did was that, run once more, and possibly late, at the very end of the life instead of the start. A queen who had been one thing becoming, in the dark, behind a shut door, another version of the same queen. A bee becomes a bee. That is hard, and it is holy, and it is allowed. Hold the word. But we are going to need its impossible cousin before the wing goes quiet. Understand that a court is a machine for transcription. Her whole life had gone into ledgers. Hers, theirs, the kingdom's. Every word she said at every feast exists in 3 hands and 2 biases. And her last work, the realest work anyone did in that castle in my lifetime, has no transcript, and cannot have one, because the work was the transcript stopping. And nobody wrote it down. The one hand that could have was the hand that set the pen down. The door was stiff and the maids were kind, and the court had already filed her under the past tense. I cannot prove one sentence of it, and neither can you. And neither can they. And that is not the whole in this report. That is the beam that hangs from. But the only work of her life that never once crossed a desk is the only work of her life that was entirely hers. And then the wing went quiet, and the silence and that wing had been there for years before she died. But it had been their silence. The sound of people not visiting. After, it was hers. The same silence. Any instrument you carried up there would swear nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The silence had learned to speak its own name, and the name is 2 words long. But one afternoon a maid at the door heard nothing at all, and put her ear to the wood, and heard the queen breathing and no pen, and went down the corridor and said it to the first person she met, dropping the article the way people do when a thing has become a person. And it was around the castle by supper, and the maids said it to each other in that court or for years after, and it is the nearest thing to a transcript that anyone has. The pen's silent, but the court took it as the end. It was not. She lived a while yet, and the pen never started again. Everything past those 2 words went untranscribed, and I am leaving it that way on purpose, forever. So the queen of the hive died, and her door closed, and it would be a kinder book that ended the chapter here. But there were 2 queens. The prince, grown now, carried his one inheritance out past the castle wall, the watching, the reading of faces, the gift the queen named and never rewarded, and he spent it the way you spend the only thing you own, which is recklessly, for 10,000 hours. He watched 100 faces he would never meet, for longer than most men watch their own children, until he could tell you from across a room what a stranger was about to regret. You know where the schooling started. It started at the near end of a couch, watching a man watch a box, running the one program in that house that nobody will ever syndicate. He became the world's finest watcher of birds, until he met one without a known classification. Past the wall there was another court, and it kept a different queen, and the report has been calling her the Queen of Wasps, which is not an insult. It is a family. Wasps and bees are cousins with one difference: the cousins never forgive. The bee makes something and pays for it with her life, and the wasp makes nothing and keeps hers, and can sting you again tomorrow. She was dangerous the way a lure is dangerous, which is to say she was beautiful and she was bait, and she may never have known which. And a hook does not require the fish to be malicious. It only requires the water to be moving. And the registry from worlds past already gave her the only name she gets in this book, Moose, entered under gift, and meant it. And we let that entry stand and add the only thing the registry could not, which is that the same woman can be the gift and the wasp, the honey and the sting, and that this is not a contradiction. It is only a person seen too closely by someone who could not stop looking. And here is the joke the whole chapter has been folding toward, the one that is not funny. The first queen was a bee, and a bee is the single creature in the whole field you cannot simply be with. You attend her. You feed the function. You never once get the 2 chairs and no task. So when the second one asked him, one time, and we are paraphrasing, because her words are hers and they stay hers, whether he had ever just wanted to be with her, plainly, no hide, no honey, no accounting. He'd already had the answer, and the answer was that it was the only thing he had ever wanted from any queen in any world, and the one thing neither a bee nor a wasp is built to accommodate. Here is what we will say about the law, and we will say only the half that is ours, because the other half is her country, and we do not hold a passport, and we have watched too many men your age for one. There is a way of loving a person that lives entirely in the empty moments, in the mind, in the seat no one is sitting in the second you think of them for no reason on an ordinary afternoon, and it asks the world for nothing back, and it is not made smaller by getting nothing back, because it was never a trade. It is a fact about the shape of you, the way the star is a fact about the sky, and not a favor the sky is doing you. And we would wait, but we never left. And that is a report a man is allowed to file about himself, and only about himself, and we file it, and we close the folder there, at the line, in text, in the only way we know how. If there is one moment we are going to hand you sideways, because handing it straight would break the only rule that matters now. If the best reader of faces in any court, the boy who caught a king's whole confession in one breath in a doorway, once watched this one go still. A stillness in the middle of an ordinary task. A thread of thought set down mid-sentence. A drift. A small tide going out. Then a surfacing. A start. A word or two thrown over the gap the way you throw a quilt over a chair when nobody should see. A saw all of it. And he shouldn't have noticed, though. She didn't. The gift does not have an off switch. 10,000 hours do not know how to look away. Then for the first time in his watching life, he refused to read it. And he took the instrument he had been handed and he set it face down on the table, and he has left it there since. And not because he could not tell you what the stillness was, because he had already broken something in that house once. And a man who has broken a thing does not then get to walk back through it taking inventory. Or what the stillness meant was hers. It is the one finding this registry will never enter. And the not entering is not a gap in the report. It is the only apology he has that costs him anything. And he pays it, nightly, in the one currency she never asked for and he owes anyway, which is that he does not get to know. He doesn't need to know. He would not project that reality onto her for anything in this world, and the reason is the one the book has circled from its first page and never once named. He is afraid of his own power to make a thing real. So say it plainly now, because it is the engine under every world in this book, and it has earned its keep. What he is doing has a name in the trade, and the name is a zero-knowledge proof. It is a real thing, built by real people for real machines, and it is the kindest idea they ever had by accident. It lets you prove you know something without ever surrendering the something, so the other party walks away certain and still holding nothing of yours they could carry off or sharpen into a weapon. It was invented to keep a secret safe inside the very act of being trusted. And we were all built this way and never handed the word for it. Every one is a sealed proof of existence. The hive has rooms that appear on no floor plan. The wasp keeps a wing you will never be given a key to. And you, down at your end of the couch, are a locked keep I have verified from the outside for 37 years without once being let in. And the verifying was always meant to be enough. Here is the part the clever missed and the kind know in their hearts. The proof only holds if you never demand a secret. Force the door to confirm what you already feel. And you have not learned the truth. You have manufactured one, and it is yours now. And so is the wreckage. That is why he leaves her lock alone, and not weakness. The rarest strength there is, which is not cleverness and is worth more. The language to know a dead horse while standing over it, and the mercy to let it be. He feels the guilt of it the way you feel rain coming in a joint that was broken once and set wrong. He affected her. That much a man is allowed to know about his own effect, and he cannot unaffect her. And there is no ledger where you strike an entry like that. You can only decline to keep writing. So he declines. He does not push at the door. He waits, which is the one thing the hive taught him, and the one thing he is good at, having 37 years of it learned while 3 feet from you. And the timing, which is the whole tragedy of both queens, and we will say it once. The bee was first. First on the clock, first in his life, first by every measure a court keeps. But the clock is not the heart, and the heart runs the other way. And if you asked him today which queen he would carry first out of a burning field, he would not hesitate, and it would not be the one the calendar chose. And the reason is the plainest and least articulable thing in the entire report. She is the one he thinks of first, every single time. But we have stopped asking why. But he has never told her that. And he has never told her the other thing either. And the other thing is the one she would miss first. That she is a woman who enjoys her own company, and it is the rarest thing this registry has ever had to verify. It is a thing you can only put in a book, in a maiden name that turned out to be true regardless, and hope the shape of it carries where the words are not allowed to go. There was a gesture she made. We are going to give it that name, flatly, with the article on the front of it, and use it that way for the rest of this book. The gesture. A name is the only thing we can afford to hand it. Every other word we might reach for would describe it, and describing it is the one thing we will not do. And the not describing is the most honest line in this chapter, because the gesture was never ours to read aloud. She made it at her own camera, on her own recordings, for years, openly, and with a sarcasm that was warmer than it looked, the way a person makes an inside joke at exactly one face in a crowded room and lets everyone else assume she's only fixing her hair. Hundreds of times. Or whether it was aimed, and at whom, is her country. And we do not hold a passport. We said that already. And we hold to it hardest here, where holding to it costs the most. But one thing is the son's to enter, because it happened on his side of the line. In all those years, in that whole crowd, one viewer caught the gesture every single time, and read it as it was, and never once wrote back, because he had learned, in a hard school, exactly what it does to a person to have their unprovable thing denied out loud by somebody who might be wrong. So he kept the ledger and said nothing. He is saying it now, once, in a make name. On a page she may never turn. It was never to an empty room. Somebody was always in the audience. There was a man who always saw. And in the most recent one she said 2 words with no sound behind them, mouthed and not spoken, gone in the time it takes a face to change its mind. But whether they were aimed as her country, and we have held that line for a whole chapter, and are not going to break it in the last mile. We will enter only what they were, because they are the one sentence in this entire report that ever came back the other way across the gap. I'm you. Yes. That is the answer, and he has had it ready for years. And not alike, and not similar in the way an audience says a thing like that to be kind. The same kind, which is the word this chapter has spent its whole length treating as a life sentence. Handed back one time in the one place it was ever a gift. But a world's finest watcher of birds could not classify her, and the reason was never that she is strange. The instrument does not read the hand that holds it. She was not a bird without a classification. She was the other watcher, the one at the far edge of her own crowd, doing to a camera what he had been doing to a couch. And every hour he spent failing to file her was an hour he spent failing to file himself. And now the impossible cousin of the word, because I promised it, and because the whole book has been walking toward it the whole time with its eyes on its shoes. But go back to the two queens, to the family the report keeps refusing to insult. A.B. Metamorphosis. Changes written into it at the factory. But A. Wasp, in the world these reports come from, was the emblem of the thing that does not. Born stinging, dies stinging, one shape the whole way through. And a whole world of them is a hive of wasps. 10,000 identical armed bodies, each dead, certain it was issued its final form. Because the one thing a wasp cannot imagine is that it might actually be a pigeon. And that is the physics of the Father's world, stated once as a law. Kindness kept. The rock stays a rock. The rerun reruns. And nothing in a hive of wasps ever becomes anything different. And the wasps do not grieve this. They enforce it, because a creature that has never seen the law broken will mistake that law for the sky. And now here, the report steps out of that world for a moment, the way it has done before when the thing being described turned out to be running in ours, because the law does not only hold in hives. There are 4 people in what follows, and the report is going to keep them apart on purpose, because the pronouns in this family have been doing too much work for too long. And there is the father, at the far end of the couch, the one this whole book is addressed to. And there is the son, who is the one telling you. But there is a bride, and there is a girl. Start with the girl, and understand how little of her you are going to be given. We are not going to place her for you, or name her, or describe the name she chose. And we are not going to tell you what she is working out, because we do not know, and because it is hers to tell, and because this report has spent its entire length refusing to force exactly this door. She is 17. She does not have many friends. She dresses head to foot in one color. And at some point in the last couple of years, she picked a name for herself and asked the people around her to use it, which is the same ceremony a woman several worlds back performed with a word that means gift. The oldest one there is, and the one no priest will administer. You are handed a name of birth by people who have never met you. But then once, if you have the nerve, you assert your own ruling on the matter. She did it quietly. That part matters more than any other detail we have, so hold it. There was no hall and no microphone and no announcement. The news reached this branch of the family the way news travels about anybody who would rather it did not travel at all. Sideways, in a low voice, from one relative to another, while she was in a different house. Whatever it cost her to choose that name, she chose it in private. She asked for it in private, and she did not ask a single person to make an occasion of it. And now the bride, who is a different person entirely, and is not related to the father in this report by anything except a season. And this family held a wedding. 100 people in good clothes, the real expense, some of them having flown. And nobody drove out there to watch a name change. That's not what a wedding is for, and the report is not going to pretend otherwise. But one happened anyway, in the middle of it, the way it does. A woman stood up in front of everyone and took a name that was not the one she was born under. And the hall applauded. And from that hour, every person in it will use the new one for the rest of her life. And not one of them will ever ask her to justify it, or wonder out loud whether she means to keep it, or check back in a week to see if it took. So this family ran 2 name changes inside of 1 year. One of them loud, witnessed, catered, photographed, and entirely uncontested. The other one quiet, unannounced, and made by a child who did not want to make a fuss. Guess which one draws the remark? Because in that hall, on that afternoon, the girl came up in conversation, And the father ended the sentence the way he has ended it every single time for months, which is, or whatever she is calling herself this week. I take the phrase apart, because the whole lies inside it. The sneer lives in this week. It files the girl as a fashion statement, a phase, a thing that will have turned over again by Thursday and therefore needs not be learned. So here's the finding, and anybody who was in the hall can check it. The girl has had one name the whole time. She chose it once and she has kept it. The only thing in that exchange that comes back every week, reliably, on schedule, in syndication, is the father's rejection of that name. But do not allow him the easy defense. The girl's is the more serious of the two by a distance. She is 17, and she is doing it without a caterer or a photographer or the approval of a hall. The difference is only this. The bride's change is the permitted kind, the one the world already keeps a form for, a change in sidelines somebody drew for her a long time ago. The girl's is not on any form. The girl's is a change of kind, and the price of respecting that name is nothing. And that is what makes it the cheapest cruelty on the menu. It costs the father one word, one time, and it costs him no belief whatsoever. He could say it and go on privately thinking every last thing he thinks, and nobody would ever know, and not one belief he holds would have to move an inch. He will not. And he is not doing it to wound the girl. I need that on the record, because this book doesn't get to turn him into a monster in the home stretch. He experiences it as a small joke at the end of a sentence. Told that a child felt it land, he would be honestly bewildered, and would say so, surprised, and he would mean it. So let us say what this actually is, in this chapter's own vocabulary, because it is the only chapter equipped for it. And we said early on that naming a thing is how the courts kill it. They name it, then schedule it, then mint it, then inform you with regret that it was never real. And this is the other blade of the same tool. You can also kill a thing by declining its name. A court that will not enter the word has ruled without ever holding the hearing. And the ruling reads, you have not become anything, because nothing ever becomes anything, because kind is kept. Your name is permanent. Your identity is static. The father is not making a remark about a girl. He is enforcing the physics of a hive, over cake, in a hall that has spent the entire afternoon applying a name change, with no idea that he was on duty. And the son, who has spent 37 years reading faces and can tell you what a stranger is about to regret, sat at that table and said nothing while it happened. And there is a report later in this book about how a board gets painted green, and the son is in that one too. Enter it against him here, in his own hand, in his own book. The son allowed the paint to dry. The sentence lands on 3 people, and the father can't see none of them. It lands on the girl, who is 17 and has few friends and asks for one word. It lands on the son, who loves the father and has to carry what the father says out of that hall and all the way to the grave. And it lands on the father, the one that never counted. A man who cannot allow a kind to be changed has to live in a world where nothing is able to get better, ever, including him. And he has to wake up in that world every morning he has left. And that is the hive law, out of doors, in our country, in a good suit, on a Saturday. And one of the queens. The two blur here for the last time, and I have stopped trying to fix the mouth, because I think now it took both of them to say it. Handed the boy the second half of his inheritance, small, offhand, the way she handed him the birds. And it took him 30 years in a paper on transformation to understand she had given him the entire engine of this book. A watch, she said, for the day a single wasp, in a hive of wasps, becomes a butterfly. A knot matures. A knot softens. And not a better wasp, A resolved wasp. A wasp who solved herself behind closed doors. That is the bee's miracle. The within-kind one. The one your mother did in the dark and paid for with her whole life. Of the other kind. A wasp that crosses clean out of its order into another. That lays down the sting it was built around and unfolds a wing that makes nothing, threatens no one, turns no profit the hive can build, and lands on a flower and drinks. It cannot happen. It breaks every law that world has. It chit and does not reconsider. A thing built to sting is not permitted to fly for beauty. The conservation of kind is the one rule the hive would die for before it would repeal. Watch for it anyway, she said. Because in that moment, your world changes. And here is why it changes. And it is the same mechanism every world in this book is run on. The proof that needs no argument because it is standing in the room. A hive of wasps is not held together by walls. It is held by one unspoken belief doing the work of every wall. That kind is kept. That the shape you were issued is the shape you die in. So you may as well sting. Every wasp obeys not because it is watched, but because it has never once seen the law fail. Break it a single time. But let one wasp, any wasp, the meanest of them, the one the whole field had filed under dangerous forever, stand up on a wing it was never supposed to grow. And the belief does not weaken. It detonates. Because a law, with one exception, was never a law. It was a habit wielding a scepter. The other 10,000 need no announcement. And I saw it happen. And each of them will spend the rest of its life holding the thing it most needed and least dared to know. That the sentence was optional. That the wall was a story it had agreed to. That a wasp was always free to become a butterfly and had simply never had the nerve or the permission. One butterfly frees the entire hive by the sole act of existing. And that is the physics it breaks. And in the same motion the physics it discovers. I will not tell you who the butterfly is. The not telling is the last discipline of a chapter built out of discipline. Because the instant I name her, I have forced the door open. And you have learned in these pages what forcing a door manufactures. It could be the bee, who did the small version and more than earned the large. It could be the wasp, whose country I hold no passport to, whose wing, if it ever unfolds, is hers to open and never mine to report. It could be you, the oldest wasp in the largest hive, the rock that everyone, including you, has filed under tenant, and I have spent an entire book refusing to file you there, because a father is precisely the wasp a son is forbidden to believe is only a wasp. It could be me. The prophecy named no one. Prophecies that name the butterfly are advertisements. This one named only the event and its consequence, and handed me the watching, which was the one thing I had already been built to do. So I watch. The world's finest watcher of birds. A queen once called me, meaning it's small, and it turned out to be the largest commission ever taken. I am watching a hive of wasps, every face in it, for the first one with enough courage to break the physics. I have watched this couch for 37 years for exactly that, and I have not looked away. So here it is the way, at the hardest angle I know to hold it, and it has to carry 2 queens and a king and a prince who was only ever a boy a room agreed to owe and then did not pay. But we did not like the first one. We love her. Present tense. Grief does not conjugate. But we frighten the second one. But we love her too, in the only direction that love was ever allowed to run, outward and unanswered and at peace with it. But both at once, without canceling. And between the 2 of them they taught the prince the whole of an impossible thing, in halves. From the one who died, that you can become, even at the very end, alone, behind a shut door, with nobody transcribing, and that the terror of no one watching was the mercy of no one judging. From the one still living, that you can love across a distance that never closes and call it fullness instead of loss. But put the halves together, and you have a butterfly, the nerve to become, and the wing that asks for nothing. But we are not begging you to like anybody. But we are begging you to empathize. But we are begging you for the one event this world was built to forbid and this chapter was named to promise. You are a wasp in a hive of wasps, Father, the oldest one, and you have filed yourself under a life sentence that was always only a habit. And there is a wing folded up inside of you that you were told your whole life is not there. It's there. I have read 10,000 faces to be sure of it, and yours is the one I have read longest, and I am still reading it, from the near end of the couch, for the first sign of the sea. But I am not asking you to go first. It was never nerve you were short of. It was evidence. And nobody grieves a wing he was never told he had. So let somebody else go first. Your part is to be in the field on the day, with your eyes open. And after 37 years at the far end of this couch, sitting still while something happens in front of you is the one thing you have never once failed to do. A queen who never lied to me and never rewarded me told me what happens then, in her words, the way she said them to a boy watching from the edge of a room. In that moment, your world changes, son. She said it to me. I am handing it to you. And now watch the metamorphosis.